huge group.
Are you happy with the focus on environment?
I very rarely get scared, and this is scaring me, is that the minimum temperature in cities is not going down. On air pollution, let's get some uncomfortable, inconvenient decisions taken to move ahead. One of the big issues with the government is that it has closed its ability to listen and to learn.
Hello, and welcome to PTI's show at 4 Parliament Street. If anyone knows India's environmental issues like the back of her hand, it is Sunita Narain. Sunita is the Director General of the Centre of Science and Environment, India's premier NGO that tackles the issues which impact the health of millions of Indians. A Padma Shri awardee, Sunita Narain was recognized by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world for her advocacy on environment and climate change. In her over 4 decades of work, Sunita has conducted in-depth research on the governance and management of the environment. In fact, her ideas have gained wide acceptance, leading to a slew of policy and regulatory measures that are built on the premise that sustainable development is not possible without inclusive and equitable growth. Sunita Narain is with us today to talk about these issues, her wish list for the new government, the perennial problem of stubble burning, the merits of coal, and her remedies for cleaner skies and rivers in India. Sunita Narain, welcome to PTI.
Happy to be here.
I'll start off with the most obvious current affairs question. We have a new government. I would like your views on what this government should do differently in this term in terms of environment, and maybe you can give us an assessment of what has been done in the last 10 years. Are you happy with the focus on environment? And especially like you to talk a bit about the Forest Conservation Act, the amendments that were made. How do you see all this?
So, overall, my assessment is that the government had the right words, the right intention even, okay, in many cases. And I can come to the Forest Amendment Act a little separately. But overall, if you look at the government policies, you can't argue that anything was per se wrong. I mean, renewable energy was on the table, drinking water was on the table, waste management was on the table, Swachh Sarvekshan was there. So you put the whole package together, it's all there. My assessment is that there wasn't enough focus on implementation. My assessment is that in this term of government, and that is something that I hope that the government doesn't look at these activities as done list, that the government looks at these activities still in progress list. And that a lot of these need to be now done and more seriously done so that there is implementation. If you look at the question of energy, clean energy, so important in our country, important for the health of women, but also important for the health of all of us in Delhi. Because if you don't have clean energy, we'll never get clean air. If you don't get clean mobility, you will never get clean air. If you don't get clean fuel to run your industry, you will never get clean air. So all these things are linked, and these go beyond the ambit of the Ministry of Environment, but these are the core issues that development is all about. Now, there are 2 things, Vijay, that I think for me need to be done differently, and 3 things actually. One, I think we need a new imagination in each one of these programs. A lot of these programs have reached a point where we have not been able to deliver the goods. Okay? If you take the question of cleaning up rivers, we haven't been able to clean our rivers. We still are in a situation where we are taking clean water from our rivers, giving back sewage to our rivers. Okay? And the only way we can clean our rivers now, and we need to understand this, is that if we don't adopt the Western way of cleaning rivers, which was always end of the pipe, that you put a sewage treatment plant and that you intercept everybody's waste and then you take it, treat it, take it to the river. We have been researching and arguing with the government for the last 10 years now, saying that a country like India needs to reinvent its sewage system so that you would collect the sewage on site, take it to a treatment plant, reuse it, recycle it. So there's a new way. I'm not going to get into the detail because your viewers will get really bored if I start talking about excreta and shit and all the rest of it. But I basically want to make the point it needs a new approach and a new imagination. And each one of the programs, and I can go program by program if you want, but the bottom line is it needs a new imagination. Now, if you want that new imagination, the government also has to understand it has to have a feedback loop. One of the big issues with the government is that it has closed its ability to listen and to learn from what's happening on the ground. It's closed its ability to be able to listen. I mean, every point of a position which may not be agreeable becomes a dissent. You're not an enemy of the state if you point out that the Ujjwala program, brilliant as it was, is not leading to the gains because of the fact that women don't have the money to buy the refill. It's something that everybody knew 2 years ago, but if you discuss it, it becomes, oh, but you're against the Ujjwala program. So I think the most important issue for the new imagination, new approaches, that we have to do development in the old-fashioned way. Development in the old-fashioned way was about learning and learning from the ground, changing your approach, and then relearning. That's the role of media. That's the role of all of us as researchers, media. We go out, we talk about what's happening, what's not working. You come back, policy gets infused, learns from it, and you do things differently. So in this echo chamber, you cannot have imagination.
But were the previous governments amenable to listening?
So I think the previous governments were more open to listening. I would argue that they weren't brave enough, courageous enough to take new ideas on board, but definitely they were more open to listening. And I think that's something which I'm not even asking government to do this as a favor to anyone. I'm asking that if you want to do things differently, you will have to be more open to the ideas that come through, to the information that comes through from the ground on the programs and the effectiveness of the programs. And my third point would be that with this, the biggest challenge today is climate change. That everything we do now, and that's something we'll have to face up to the reality, everything has to be kept in mind that we are now at a point where India is at high risk because of climate change. I mean, our data, so CSE Down to Earth, we put together a database on extreme weather events from the IMD data itself, the Indian Met Department's data. And we essentially will tell you from their data that we are averaging one extreme weather event a day in India. One a day, okay? Now that means too hot, too cold, too much water, too little water, avalanche, landslide, they have defined it. So we take the IMD data and we put this together. Now, why is this important? Because all this impinges on development. If you have such heat as you have right now, it makes it more difficult for people to work. It increases the mortality burden. Look at what happens to farmers. So development is going to be hit because of climate change, which means the pace of development will have to be much more accelerated, and you can't get it wrong. You can't do the disasters you're doing in the Himalayas in the name of development. You cannot do this because the Himalayas are the most vulnerable in the world. So I think that's my overall.
I'll just push you on that, what you said about this government not listening and just being the devil's advocate. Yes, you said that the other previous governments wanted to listen or were open to listening. But at the same time, the environmental degradation that we face today is the cumulative result of inaction over the years. So is it fair to blame only the 10 years of the government or since 1947?
So Vijay, please separate out what I'm saying, okay? Because I don't want to be seen as this sort of mad woman who comes here and says that, everything is bad only in this government. I think that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying government has had schemes to deliver on each one of the important parameters. I believe those programs have worked, but not enough. It's work incomplete. To do that work more, we are going to have to learn, listen, change the way we do things, a new approach, a new imagination to operate. If you ask me to compare this government to the past governments in terms of environmental track record, I will tell you very clearly they're all bad. Okay? So when you look at so you see, the trouble with environment is, and that I think is part of the challenge we have as environmentalists, is environment has been very narrowly looked at from the point of view कि आप पेड़ लगा रहे हैं कि नहीं, आप पेड़ काट रहे हैं कि नहीं. For me, the definition of environment is much wider. It's about agriculture, it's about soil health, it's about water, it's about sanitation, it's about rivers. So the ambit for environment for me and for most of us in the environmental field is bigger than the Ministry of Environment. In fact, the crisis we have and the challenge we have today, it's not the fault of the Ministry of Environment. The problem is that environmental issues now require something which is much bigger than a single ministry, a lying ministry.
So we should not be putting it in silos. You're saying that the key to a better environment is political then?
No, that's too vague, what's political. I think the key to a better environment is an ability to look at different aspects and to bring it together. I mean, to me, the Niti Aayog, the Prime Minister's office, these are places where many of these things can be brought together. If you look at climate change today, climate change is way beyond the ambit of the Ministry of Environment. You're talking about how to redo your cities. If you look at today, your biggest challenge is how do you redo the cities, your building parameters. You go to Gurgaon, it's all glass facades. Those glass facade buildings are the worst thing that you could do for a heating climate. Now, but that is under the ambit of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, okay? Setting the rules for that is under a different department. So somewhere, a lot of these, what is demanded today for governance is, on many of these issues which go beyond the ambit of one single ministry, you are going to require much greater ability to bring different departments together, different ministries together, learn and move ahead.
So a holistic solution involving all the branches of the government and the civil society.
And civil society I think civil society is as important as the media. Okay, I'm just seeing this as a way to get a feedback loop.
Right.
Okay, as I'm not asking us to be implementers. We cannot be. Government, the scale of government is very different. It's their job to govern. But it's our ability to be able to learn and bring new ideas to the table and what's working, what's not working. For instance, a year ago, CSE had done a lot of work. We do a lot of work on solid waste, to give you one of the areas. So we did a report some years ago called Not in My Backyard, where we essentially looked at different cities of India and we said that the way to manage your waste is going to be different from the government strategy. That was 2016, so just as the government had taken over, so not their fault. But the government strategy till then was visible cleaning. Clean your city, jhadu lagao, and agar, waste samne nahi dikhna chahiye. And we said that's not the way. You have to take your whole issue of waste reprocessing. So which meant segregation at the household level, which meant collection at the household level. The government has been amazing in the last few years, where the entire ranking of cities has changed based on the whole idea of segregation at the household level. Okay. Now, I'm not saying we are responsible for it, but all we ended up with doing was to look at what cities are doing good work and bringing those examples and helping to see what more can be done, how that work can move ahead, what can be done even better. Indore, for instance, is a city which is taking its wet waste and making gas out of, and it's running its buses from it. The government has a program today to do this in 300 cities of India. I think those are remarkable things. Now, my only thing is just do it in those 300 cities. Don't let it be just another program that doesn't get to the logical end. So, to me, you asked me, what do I want this government to do differently? I want this government to be far more focused on implementation rather than optics.
Yeah. So you did refer to extreme weather event every day. So I want to focus on the current brutal heat wave
Yes.
across the southern and the eastern and the northern parts of the country. Temperatures past 50, touching 50. Do you think the country is really prepared for this level of warming? And daily you see pictures of water crisis, people scrambling for water, power outages. What kind of measures do you think should be taken to protect the vulnerable sections, given the kind of impact it has on the infrastructure, on the daily lives?
Very good question. I mean, frankly, nobody is prepared for it. Be very clear, okay? All over the world now, last year, 2023, was the hottest year on record, okay, globally. 2023 was the hottest year on record in India. We have broken every record in the last 45 days where we've had an unbroken 40 degrees and above temperature. So there is no question about it. This is climate change. It's getting added this year with the waning of the El Nino as well, but it is climate change. Now, this means we really need to get our act together. There are two levels. One is, of course, the fact that, as you very rightly said, the more vulnerable communities. I mean, you and I are still sitting in relative comfort. We are still comforted by all the appliances that we can have. And we should remember that every appliance we use and every air conditioning device, and I keep saying this, will add to the crisis because it is going to use energy also, which is coal-based energy, which then adds to more pollution, more greenhouse gases. So we are in a vicious circle. But clearly, we need to make sure that the more vulnerable communities are less affected. Now, for that, we need two levels of action plan. One, we need a disaster management plan, which means as soon as we need a health index. We don't have a heat index right now. We have an air pollution index, which is something I worked on and we got instituted. That air pollution index tells you on the phone what is the level of air pollution and what does it do to your health. Okay? Now that linkage is very important for you as a person also to know what are the actions I can do. We need a similar heat index. Because remember, heat is not about temperature. Heat is about humidity. Heat is about ventilation. Okay? In this room with air conditioner, without a fan, you are going to be distinctly more uncomfortable than a room which had an air conditioner with a fan. Because at the end of the day, your skin needs to breathe. And that's the science of the heat that we all need to bring in. So we need a heat index. We need to institute it so that the government actually, IMD puts out, today's heat index is this. And it has a bar which says, okay, if you're above 35 degrees, because 35 degrees with wet bulb is seen to be really dangerous, leads to death. We need to know that that's where the index is. Secondly, we need programs to come in, like you do for air pollution, the GRAP measures, as an emergency measure, that if the heat index goes beyond a certain point, you change the schooling time, you change when people are advised to go out. You also provide for workers. The worst is workers, construction workers, all the rest of it. You have to do much more to give them the access to cooling as much as possible. The other thing that our data is showing, which is scary now, is we've just done a new report on city profiling on heat. And what scared me, I'm using the word scare, I very rarely get scared, and this is scaring me, is that the minimum temperature in cities is not going down. And what we are now pointing to is that this heat island effect of cities means that your bodies are not getting a chance to recover. So which means that you're getting more deaths at night than you're getting during the daytime. Because normally minimum temperature would fall and you would be able to recover to go back to work the next day. Just not getting that. So you need an emergency, but along with that, you need a much better plan to deal with heat in our cities. Now that means, one, how much green area do you have? How much open area do you have? How many lakes, ponds do you have? Water bodies do you have? Then when you're making your construction sites, very simple thing. When you're making your high-rise construction sites, we need a law to say what will be the wind direction of the construction sites. Okay? We don't have any concept of management of wind in our construction site. Okay? Then the whole principles of passive architecture. Traditional Indian buildings look different in Kerala to Haryana. And the reason was that people learned to live with the local environment. Okay? In Rajasthan, they had a courtyard. Why? Because it was the movement of wind. They had chhajjas, okay, to make sure that the wind, that the sun would never hit you directly, that there would just be a shade device. There was a whole lot of effort to make sure that your building material was insulated. Okay? All that will have to come in, and at affordable rates. So you will need to change modern architecture to learn from traditional architecture and even get better at it. You cannot allow Gurgaon type furnaces to come up.
Ma'am, the government says that we are balancing development and protecting environment at the same time. But if we see at the number of clearances granted, the numbers are telling. We had 577 forest, environmental and coastal clearances granted in 2018. It shot up to over 12,000 in 2022. Earlier, we would take 150 days to give an environment clearance. Now it takes 70 days. What's your view on that?
From my point of view, just dismantle the entire system. It's not working. It's just not working. The environmental clearance system is not working either for environment or for development. It is only working for a breed of consultants, of auditors, of many other people who look at projects and clear them. And I can give you a whole list of why it is not working. Let's be clear. All governments have cleared projects, okay? We put out data on the number of projects cleared by the UPA government, and we showed the scale of clearance was as high as the clearance is now. All the governments have done progressively, every government has done, is to dilute the decision-making system, make it weaker, 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 weaker. It makes no sense today. So what happens when you apply for a project clearance? You apply for a project clearance, goes to the Ministry of Environment. It gets a file number. Then you're supposed to do an environmental impact assessment. The project proponent is supposed to do an environmental impact assessment, which means that we know the quality of the environmental impact assessment that I'm paying for. And I know we started a whole process. We had asked the government to do accredited agencies which would then be held to account for the quality of the EIA, because most of the EIAs are cut and paste documents. Okay? So all that process has been diluted today. We know that that document comes. There is a committee that sits pretty much in a room like this, faceless people, no accountability. They sit there and decide on whether this project could be granted clearance or not. How do they grant it clearance? By making sure that it has 100 conditions. And those 100 conditions cannot be implemented, okay? Cannot be enforced. There is no system even to make sure that those clearances, that those conditions for implementation, those conditions for compliance are actually enforced. Why? Because those are given under the EP Act. The EP Act can only be looked at by the regional offices of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. They're not done by the pollution control boards. The regional offices are understaffed. There are no people there. They don't have the ability to go and even check whether that condition has been enforced or not. It's a system which is broken. It is not, the entire focus of the government for this last 5 years has been, let's speed up the process. Okay? I have no problem. Speeding up is good. Loss of time is bad for economics. Why would I want a 3-year process to get clearances? The cost of the project goes up. I want an effective, hard, tough decision-making process which balances the good versus the bad. Because no project is only good. No project is only bad. So you're going to have to, this is the mediation. The environmental clearance process was to bring a balance between environment and development. If you break down the process, you dilute the institutions, you make them spineless, you basically make it into a system which doesn't work. then of course you have either environment or development.
So we've been talking a lot about policy, government, experts. But when civil society responds, when you have people protest, like we saw in Ladakh, in Chhattisgarh, the resonance is not what you expect. And governments don't really react. So what do you have to say about that?
When the governments handle these protests, it comes across as rather confrontational.
So, but nature of protest is confrontational. So, but see, there are two things. One is follow up from what I was asked on the EIA and the forest clearances. Now, these processes had inbuilt ways of managing people's opinions so that it did not become a protest. You had a public hearing process. A public hearing was supposed to be broadcast, was supposed to be done in a way that you listen to people. Now, those processes have been diluted. Those public hearings, even if people come and say, कि इस project में ये कमियां हैं, nobody listens to it. The project is still cleared. Now, if you listen to those views at that time, that issue does not become a point of conflict. After all, at the end of the day, it's all about my backyard, and it's about what is it that people are worst affected by. Not everybody who comes to the protest is a paid lackey of the competitor. How these protests have been put out, कि आपको तो पैसा दिया गया कि आप आके protest करें. I think this distrust in people has to be fixed, because there are issues on which people are genuinely affected, and there needs to be institutional processes to listen to them. Now, when those processes fail, obviously there's going to be confrontation, there's going to be protest, dissent. I think that's part of democracy, and they have to be heard. I mean, I'm too old at this, so I was shocked. I have to say, I was genuinely shocked at the way we treated the farmers' protest. Okay, I have never known of us barricading and all that. To me, it was an alien thing that you did that. I mean, I'm old enough to tell you, Tiketh came and lived here in the boat club. For how long? Okay, I mean, and we all came here and we all came and saw the farm. That was part of India. That was part of the way it was. But then look at Europe. Look at the way their protests have been dealt with. Look at the student protest in the US today. They're sending in armed guards into universities. So I think there is a shift, and that's scary. It should worry us that there is a shift towards an intolerance, towards listening to voices from the other side, because you can label them as something which is not done.
I'm coming back to Delhi. You talked about air pollution in Delhi. So has Delhi really brought down the air pollution as being claimed by the local government? And also, what is it possible, if at all it is possible, how long will it take to address this problem fully?
So I think Delhi has taken a lot of steps. So let's not only say nothing has happened, and I can list them for you. We are the only city in the world, in this country, which has banned the use of coal. And that's big, okay? We have closed down our last coal-based power plant, Badarpur, first Rajghat, then Badarpur. We have changed our power plant to gas. We have brought in BS6 fuel. We have put a congestion charge on all trucks coming into Delhi. We have built an eastern, western peripheral expressway so that now the trucks don't come through Delhi. They actually can take a way around Delhi. We have, and this is not we meaning government, okay, central and state. So this is, there has also been an effort to make sure that you incentivize the use of gas, 0 VAT on gas in Delhi. CNG is now, natural gas is now available in industrial areas across the city. So a lot of things have happened. Okay, and more action than, and those actions have had an impact, because you don't act without a result. There are results. There are two problems now, and therefore you do see pollution levels. If you look at it year-wise, year over, the pollution levels have come down. But there are two factors that are making things worse and will continue to make things worse. The first factor is out of your control. The first factor is weather. Okay, this last winter, we had no rain, if you remember. Now, why is there no rain? Because now, the western disturbance, as you know, are these winds that come across, and these are now, western disturbance is being affected by the changes in the jet stream, the Arctic jet stream. They're weakening, getting more erratic. As a result of it, western disturbances are getting impacted. We are now finding that western disturbances are moving. If you see no wind, no snow in the hills till recently, a lot of it has got to do with factors outside your control. You know, the weather is more globalized than anything. And this has a lot to do with climate change that is happening. So on one hand, less wind, less rain, you will have more polluted days. Okay, that's out of your control. The other hand, all actions that you have taken up till now, and these actions were taken up to 2021. You are not taking actions at the speed of the crisis that is happening. So what will happen is that crisis to बढ़ता जाएगा, गाड़ियाँ तो बढ़ती जाएंगी, factories तो आती जाएंगी, farmers burning is episodal, and I can come to it. That's not what bothers me. What bothers me is the more bigger sources of pollution that happen in a city. We're not taking action. You need to now, I mean, my biggest ask from the next government would be to bring natural gas under GST. The first easiest thing we can do to reduce pollution in Delhi. If you bring it under GST, the triple taxation on gas today, which makes gas completely unaffordable as a fuel, clean gas, as compared to dirty coal, that goes. Okay? So you have to act. You have to reduce the number of cars on your roads. How do you reduce the number of cars? By increasing public transport. When was the last major bus brought? I'm not talking about ikka dukka, I'm talking about the big reform. When did it happen? Tell me. It happened in Sheila Dikshit's time in 2009, 2010, 2011, when the entire cluster buses came into Delhi during the Commonwealth Games and beyond. Today, none of those buses have been replaced. You may have read the minister's statement saying those buses will need to go now off the roads because they have reached the end of their lifetime. And this is after the government has increased the lifetime twice. Okay? You need buses. Your ridership of buses is going down because you have such erratic bus services. You have so many buses which are broken on the road. You don't have the right to cross a road. If I want to take a bus, I have to cross the road, right? Because एक दफे तो बस इधर आएगी, दूसरी तरफ तो उस तरफ आएगी ना. I need my bus to be connected to my metro systems. I need that to be connected to a parking system. I need parking rates to be increased. It's all something that is in the white paper of Delhi to do in fact, NCR to do for air pollution control. My only request is, and that's again the request for a new government, new energy, new urgency, is that on air pollution, let's get some uncomfortable, inconvenient decisions taken to move ahead. We will never clean up the air of Delhi by being nice to everybody, particularly the rich of Delhi.
So, ma'am, I have two questions. First, on the lifeline of Delhi, which is Yamuna. So, how can we save the dying Yamuna in Delhi?
Dying? It's dead. Uska dissolved oxygen level 0 hai. Dissolved oxygen level of any water body which is 0 means that it is technically dead. It has no oxygen. Between the time it enters Delhi at Wazirabad and leaves in Okhla, that stretch of 22 kilometers. Sorry,
So is there any way to, get it back to save the people of Delhi?
How is Delhi affected by it? That's the problem. How is Delhi affected by it? Only the people in Noida who live near the nalas have this terrible smell, okay? And their air conditioners and all the other systems are deteriorating, and I keep getting calls from them saying, "Kuch kariye, hamara bahut acid hai yahan par." Otherwise, aapko kya farak padta hai nadi se? Aapne Sahibi, do you know the word Sahibi Nadi? So Sahibi was the Nadi, the river that came from the Aravlis and flew into and went into Yamuna. Do you know the name of Sahibi today? Najafgarh Nala. You have converted, this is my generation. I'm not blaming anyone else. It's happened in my generation. We have made a river into a Nala. Okay? Why is Delhi okay, I'll come to Yamuna, but my larger question is, what is Delhi bothered about? Okay? It's an aesthetic problem at most. So my formula was, and I actually, at one time, you asked about, I actually put this in a planning commission document, of course, too inconvenient, but I did put it in, which said that every city should be required to take its drinking water at the end of its river, not at the beginning, which meant that Delhi would have to draw its drinking water from Okhla, not from Wazirabad, which meant that all the sewage of Delhi is what you would drink. Because today the sewage of Delhi is Mathura's problem. Do you know Agra has set up a drinking water plant which is more expensive than a sewage treatment plant? Because the sewage that we sent from Delhi goes to Mathura and then to Agra. Okay? So rivers are going to be necessary in a climate risk world because water is going to be necessary. Today, the hullabaloo that is happening, the tutu meme that is happening on drinking water of Delhi, ya Haryana nahi de raha hai, ye nahi de raha hai, mera pani. This system of water is broken. Okay? You get your water from so far away that you actually do not care anymore. You get your water from Teri Dam, which comes to Sonia Vihar. You get your water from Himachal, and you get it from Haryana through this very broken system. Now, in my view, Haryana will also be giving you sewage tomorrow, because as it grows, it's going to have no water. Your rivers are going to be critical for your water supply for the future. The reason is you will need more water in a climate variable period where you will get more rain and it will come in fewer number of rainy days, which means your ability to manage floods is going to be critical and you will have longer periods of drought. What you're seeing today in Delhi, which really means that the system of water supply has to be fixed. And the only way you can fix that is to really think about how you can capture the rain where and when it falls. Go back to rainwater harvesting. Lakes, ponds of Delhi, of Bangalore, of Hyderabad. So protect your lakes and ponds, because when it rains, you're going to have to hold the water. Recharge your groundwater. Use that recharge groundwater for your drinking, for your local water supply, so that if all of lutein, and I call it lutein, I don't call it Luton's Delhi, if lutein Delhi was to get its water only from, it has enough green areas over here. If it basically got water from its own areas, from the recharge, it would also be more responsible for the quality of recharge. Today, there is gross inequity in Delhi. Lutein Delhi officially gets 500 liters per capita per day. Okay? You have less people here, but still 500 liters per capita per day. Most parts of Delhi officially get 30 liters per capita per day. So we have to look at these systems. This is where it's not about getting drawn into this controversy between Haryana and Delhi and koi de raha hai, koi le raha hai, kitna waste ho raha hai. There's a broken system. And all your cities are coming to day zero. You've just gone through Bangalore and the crisis of water. All your cities are coming to day zero. And with climate change, it's only going to get worse because you will get more rain in fewer number of rainy days and less rain over long periods.
Ma'am, this is on stubble burning. So do you think that have states been successful in controlling stubble burning despite availability of farmer machinery at subsidized level and policy intervention as well? What's your thought on this?
Obviously not. But Haryana has done a better job than Punjab last year. No question about it. All data is showing that. But I'm also told, and something we want to look at for this year is that it's about what data you're using to count the number of fires as well. Because there are many satellites in which data you use. But the larger point is, wo bichara kisan karega kya? I mean, why do they burn stubble? Let's get some idea about that. And so then we can look for what's the solution. And why has stubble burning only become a problem in the last 15 years? So farmers always burn stubble. They've in fact burned stubble twice a year, once in April and then once again when the crops are harvested. Why did you never feel it in Delhi? Because the farmers basically burnt stubble in September when there were retreating monsoons, and the wind would take it away and you would never feel it. What changed is, and that's where the balance comes in, knowing what happens. What changed was the fact that because of groundwater depletion in Punjab, and rightly so, the government mandated that you could only sow paddy after the 10th of June, so that you did not use the groundwater for the first two sowing, for the period when there was no rain. You would wait for the rains to come. So you would do one irrigation and then you would have the rain. So the idea was to save groundwater, to shift the date of paddy growing, planting. Now, because the date of paddy planting has shifted, the date of paddy harvesting has shifted. So you have now shifted the harvest of paddy from September to mid-October, November. And that happens when Diwali happens, when inversion happens, and we choke. Now, if you want to get farmers not to cut stubble, not to burn stubble, you're going to have to give them a viable alternative to the value of stubble. The government has tried. There are some bio-CNG projects that have been set up in Punjab. Verbio has set up some, others are setting it up. It's not happening at the scale that it needs to. So when I go back to the first question I was asked, what would I like to see different? I would like to see these implementation happen, and at fast. I mean, when CNG came into Delhi, and I was very much part of that, we brought in 100,000 vehicles in a matter of a year. Okay? The entire infrastructure for CNG was created in 1.5 years. You could see the scale so that you could see a difference. That's the same thing that will have to happen with stubble burning. So government's on the right approach, but it just needs to make sure that that happens at scale now.
So you briefly talked about the coal, how Delhi actually succeeded in stopping the coal electricity power generation. Should that happen across the country? And how does that, work for the poorest of the poor people?
I'm glad you're asking me that, because we have stuck our neck out on that. As an Indian environmentalist, we have argued across the world, including with very powerful people, and including with, I have spoken at major forums with media organizations from across the world, from Guardian, New York Times, everyone saying, this is not a fair take for us. We're a country which requires energy. We require energy at affordable rates. And for us, coal is the sustenance for us. Today, as of today, it's still 80% of the installed power, 70% of the energy supplied. It cannot disappear, okay? My argument is twofold. My argument is number one, and I agree with the Government of India's position on this. The government, and in fact, the Prime Minister, when he went to Glasgow, you'll remember a few years ago for COP, he had put forward a very clear position, which I thought was a very, very good position for the government to take, which is India will need to double its energy consumption between now and 2030. We're at very low energy levels today. But that doubling of energy will happen on clean sources of power. Okay? Which means that we will accelerate and ramp up our clean sources of power. It does not mean that we will phase out our coal, which is current. Okay? What we have argued is that we need to clean up our coal-based power plants. And that is something I have been quite open and rather clear about, is that the Government of India in 2015 had passed rules for improving the emission performance of coal-based power plants, NOx, SOx, PM level rule. It was supposed to be implemented as of 2017. The rule is still in breach, okay, not been implemented. So cleaner coal is going to be necessary for our local air pollution, which is where Delhi has closed it. Cleaner coal may also be possible for us as a way to combat climate change, because just as you would have to do CCS on gas, you can also do CCS on coal, if that is the way you will need to go. But the fact is, we need to ramp up our new energy system from to make sure it is cleaner, but argue with the rest of the world that we cannot close down our coal-based power plants. We can clean them up, but we can't close them down. And I think that's a very fair position for the rest of the world to take. I mean, I think it's a position we should take, and we are taking. However, we are half taking it because we're not cleaning up the coal. We're just wanting to run our dirty coal-based power plants. And I'm saying, clean up the coal, keep running on coal for your, I mean, the government of India's plan was that by 2030, if you look at the CA plan, by 2030, in the doubling that we would have, we would bring down our dependence on coal to 50%. And the increase that would happen on wind, solar, hydropower. You know, today hydropower is going down, and that was again the question that hydropower, in spite of all the dams we are building, actually the contribution of hydropower to energy is going down, not up.
India wants to hold the UN climate talks in 2028. Many people think that this UN climate talks and other conferences is just hot air adding to the pollution in the world. What is your opinion? Should India be hosting these talks, or does it make sense to have these talks?
No, absolutely we should hold them. And absolutely we must talk. See, climate change is a very unique problem in the world, which cannot be sorted on a bilateral level at all. It's a multilateral issue. You polluted yesterday, I will pollute tomorrow. Okay? It'll go into the same common atmosphere. Okay? If you want me not to pollute tomorrow, the terms of engagement will have to be based on cooperation. Okay? You can't hit me on the head and say, you will not pollute, you will not develop, you will not make your energy system. I will. Okay? And the more I increase my emissions, it will go into the same atmospheric space. It's a common atmospheric space. In fact, climate change is one way that you could relearn socialism, okay? Because it is about a common atmospheric space where we are going to have to learn to live together. And the UN talks are the only forum where you do multilateral decision-making. However broken the system is, it is important. Ukraine war came and all the talk about renewables went to the background, Germany is going back to building LNG stations. The US is today talking about fracking more and more, talking about more and more lands to be opened out. Of course, if Donald Trump comes, all this is history that you and I are talking about. So this is the reality. The elections that have happened in the European Union, it's good that the centrist parties have held some power, but right-wing is growing. So much protest against the EU Green Deal, so much anger against the environmental actions that are being taken. We need a forum where we can come together as nations to discuss. Yes, India should hold the talks. I think India is a very important part of the global leadership. We play an important role. We can play an even bigger role as a country which stands for countries of the South. We have challenges. We can talk about our challenges, not paper over them, and we can help the world to find a better way ahead. We can play a leadership role.
So there is wishful thinking and there is also a practical analysis. When do you think, setting aside wishful thinking, when do you think India will have the clean blue skies of Europe and rivers that are clean?
It all depends on our ability to implement our projects and to take some inconvenient decisions.
10 years, 20 years?
No, you can do it tomorrow. So when winter comes, suppose the government says that everybody has to leave their car at home. No SUV will be allowed on the road. No diesel car will be allowed on the road. But then for that you will also argue कि मुझे बस दो, मुझे पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट दो. अगर ये कर सकते हैं, आप कल साफ कर सकते हैं दिल्ली की हवा. अगर आप गैस को वैट में ले आते हैं and you insist that all the factories around Delhi which use coal today shift to gas, you will reduce Delhi's air. But you will create an inconvenience because there are parts of India, there are states of India which are today earning from the tax that they get out of the export of gas. Are you willing to take that decision? To put VAT, to put gas under VAT? It's going to be inconvenient. You can probably compensate those states. It's Maharashtra, it's Gujarat, and it's few other states because remember, gas is taxed at the time the LNG comes into a state. It's taxed once again when it leaves the state. So there's double taxation and that goes into the state GDP. So tough decisions. But those are the decisions, and I think this government is more than capable of taking tough decisions. It's a government which has the capacity to take tough decisions. These issues have to be things that are being on their table and they are followed through on. That was my basic point. So you can get clean air in, I mean, when we brought in CNG in 2001, 2002, Delhi saw stars in 2004. That's how quick nature bounces back. I mean, think of COVID. सब कुछ दिख रहा था. Nature की जो ability है to हमें हमारी नदियाँ साफ हो गई थी. If you look at the data of river cleaning, to some extent, not completely because, sewage was still flowing in because, if you eat, you will excrete. If you excrete, you will have sewage. If you have sewage, you will have pollution. So that is not something that whether you're locked down or not, you will still have sewage. So wo to nahi hua, but the litter was down in your rivers, big time. Your air was cleaner. So nature has an ability to bounce back. And I think the government can give you clean air, they can give you clean rivers, but it's going to take, as I said, that imagination and focus.
And ability to take inconvenient decisions.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for spending the time with us.
Not at all. Thank you.